Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Stephen Chung. He is joining us from Wenatchee. And just a brief introduction, Dr. Chung graduated medical school from Loma Linda University, and he completed neurology residency at UC Davis in Sacramento. He spent 13 years as a neurologist and sleep specialist in Crossville, Tennessee. And then he moved to Walla Walla, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting him and his family. His daughter Elisa is one of my best friends through high school. He's got 3 kids, Nathan, Justin, and Elisa, and they're all wonderfully musically talented, and as is his wife as well. And after the 10 years here in Walla Walla, where he was also a neurologist and sleep specialist, he moved to Wenatchee, where he is a full-time sleep specialist at Confluence Health. And he's delivered various neurology and sleep lectures through the years for communities and churches, including for Amen Conference at Columbia Conference in 2018. And some of his hobbies and interests include hiking, bicycling, snow skiing, and if time allows, he enjoys cooking. So thank you all for being here, for optimizing health through sleep. And Dr. Chung will be giving opening prayer in just one moment here.
Is that good? Yeah, it's not on mute anymore. You're good.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and it's a privilege to be here tonight. And before we get started, let's have a word of prayer. Dear loving Heavenly Father, thank you for a wonderful Sabbath day today to rest in you, to remember your creation and your love, kind love for us. Thank you so much for this opportunity to get together, to talk about how wonderfully and fearfully you have created us, especially in regards to sleep. And as we talk about this tonight, be here with us. May your Holy Spirit fill this place. And may this talk be a blessing. Be with me as I talk. Give me clear mind and be able to communicate clearly tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, I'm going to scoot over to my computer. All right, so before I want to begin, I want to ask you a question. Why do we sleep? And that's probably a common question maybe some of you have asked. Why do you think God designed us to sleep? Yeah, so of course we all have experienced poor sleep, adverse effects of poor sleep, and we just don't feel good the following day. We just can't function as well the following day. We all know that resting well at night, getting good sleep at night helps us to be rejuvenated and be rested and function well the following day. But I want to answer some questions tonight, particularly can sleeping well do more than just make us feel rested in the morning? Like poor diet and lack of exercise could lead to diseases. Can having good sleep health help us to live better and maintain good health? And maybe going a little bit further, can good sleep health help us to get along with each other better, have better relationship with God? So we're going to explore all these things tonight and also delve into the science of sleep and how our God has created us, in particular to sleep science, and how God has helped scientists to figure out how sleep happens in our at night when we are sleeping. So Mrs. White counseled us and said, this living machinery, referring to our body, should be understood. Every part of this wonderful mechanism should be carefully studied. So why did she say that? She also said, God's law is written by his own finger upon every nerve, every muscle, every faculty which has been entrusted to man. And she further stated, we are God's workmanship, and his word declares that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. He has prepared this living habitation for the mind, a temple which the Lord himself has fitted up for the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So she has clearly instructed us to study the workings of our bodies, and we're going to study workings of our sleep tonight. So I was trained, as Emily stated, I was trained as a neurologist, and the sleep science has been somewhat of an interest to me. And so I am very happy to be here to share the understanding that I have so far, what sleep does for us and how we can live more happily with better sleep health. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about 3 pillars of sleep. You've all heard about probably 3 pillars of health, which is exercise, diet, but third one is sleep, right? But this is my own personal way of dividing sleep health, and I would like to call it 3 pillars of sleep, and it consists of duration of sleep, timing of sleep, and quality of sleep. So duration of sleep pertains to how many hours of sleep we need to be healthy, right? So how many hours of sleep is best for us? And that we will dig into a little bit deeper, but that does depend on our age and individual genetic makeup. And the second thing, the timing of sleep, pertains to when you go to sleep and when you get up in the morning. And so sleeping at the right time is important to align our sleep with our body rhythm, called circadian rhythm. You may have heard that word before, which is important in keeping our body to function at its best. And quality of sleep, of course, refers to how well you sleep through the night. Quality of sleep can be disrupted by many different things, including comfort of your bedding and noises, light in your bedroom, as well as some medications or even substances like caffeine and nicotine, drugs and alcohol and so on, of course. Some medical conditions or mental conditions, including pain and sleep disorders such as sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, can interfere with quality of sleep. So quality of sleep actually pertains to disturbances of sleep architecture, and I'll get into this a little bit more. And the disturbance of balance of different types of sleep and stages of sleep is what's pertaining to quality of sleep. We'll talk about all this in more detail, but at this time I want to give a little preview of what genetic differences may look like regarding sleep. And I want to use my family as an example. So this is my family. You see my lovely wife in the center, my Christine, and to your far right is my oldest son, Nathan, and farthest left is Justin, our second son, and Alisa is in the middle right. She's holding Mia, our pet dog. And Mia requires about 14 hours of sleep. But the rest of us require about between 7 and 9 hours of sleep to feel the best. Some of us, even within our own family, some of us require a little bit longer sleep than others. Some of us need just 7 hours, and some of us need up to close to 9 hours of sleep. And some of us prefer to go to bed a little bit later because we don't get as tired until later time, and we tend to want to get up a little bit later. And a few of us want to go to bed a little bit earlier and get up earlier. And so this is because of slight genetic variation in our genetic makeup, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So now we're going to do a deep dive into the science of sleep. So hang on with me. So sleep is divided broadly into 2 types of sleep, REM sleep and non-REM sleep. Of course, REM sleep stands for rapid eye movement sleep, and that's when we are actively dreaming. And we enter sleep through light stage of non-REM sleep, and we get into a little bit deeper non-REM sleep, and then we get back into light sleep before we get into REM sleep. And that cycle lasts about 90 minutes. And we cycle through this sleep cycles every 90 minutes, and we have about 4 to 6 cycles through the night. And in a healthy young adult, non-REM sleep accounts for about 75% of total sleep time. And it's divided into 4 stages. Stages 1 and 2 are considered light sleep, and you easily get aroused during this time with surrounding noises or other interruptions. Stage 1 sleep is when you're experiencing drowsiness, and after a few minutes of this, you enter stage 2 sleep. And as you enter stage 2 sleep, you might twitch a little bit. Have anyone experienced that twitch? Yeah. But that's normal, so you don't have to worry about that. And you may not do that every night. Then after that, you enter into stage 3 and stage 4 sleep, or deep sleep. These stages are also known as slow wave sleep because when you measure the brain wave through EEG, the brain waves are really slow and rhythmic during this time. And there is a reason for this, and I'll tell you what that is later in the talk. It is difficult to wake up from slow wave sleep, and it is during this stage of sleep that sleepwalking and sleep eating may happen. By the way, have you experienced waking more tired after a long nap? Anyone? Yes? Yeah, we all have. And that's because you slept at the wrong time for deep sleep. And so healthy, rejuvenating naps are just 20 minutes, just waking up just before that deep sleep occurs, okay? So what is the function of non-REM sleep? Creativity is boosted during stage 1 sleep. An interesting story is told of Thomas Edison, the famous inventor of electricity or light bulb, who would take short naps while trying to solve a problem. And when he takes a nap, took those naps, he had a globe in his hand. And so as he falls asleep into light stage sleep, then he would drop the globe or the big ball and wake him up. And he would have an idea. And so he would write it down and he would go on. And so that's stage 1 sleep. During stage 2 sleep, there's what's called sleep spindles. And these are short bursts of codes in a form of fast brain wave activities that go from short-term memory bank to other parts of the brain to prepare for long-term memory storage. And during slow wave sleep or deep sleep, important memories are solidified with continuation from the light stage sleep into long-term memory by making those nerve connections stronger and making nerve connections to less important memory weaker. Also, during slow wave sleep, growth hormone is released as well as many other hormones, which restores and rejuvenates our brain, our muscles, and our organs. Also, during deep sleep, hormones that regulate metabolisms are released, and metabolic toxins that develop while we are awake from the metabolic processes are cleared from our brain. Deep sleep is concentrated in the first half of the night and represents about 20% of total sleep. And I think someone asked me at the potluck, how do you get deep sleep? And we'll try to talk about that later. REM sleep accounts for about 25% of total sleep time, and it is concentrated more in the latter half of the night. And so if you wake up too early and don't go back to sleep, then you truncate that REM sleep, so you don't get as much REM sleep. This stage of sleep is associated with reduction in amygdala activity. How many of you know what amygdala is? Yeah, great. So amygdala is the part of the brain that controls our emotion. It's when the activity goes up, it's responsible for our anxiety, stress, and fear. So REM sleep actually reduces that signal and restores your emotional health and reduce negative emotional reactions during the day. Also, it is thought that more creativity occur during this stage of sleep, and muscle memory is solidified as well. So during REM sleep, actually, the brain waves become faster And it kind of mimics the waking part of the brain waves. Heart rate also and even breathing become more irregular as well, also mimicking when the person is awake and active and doing things. And so, as I mentioned, REM sleep is when we're dreaming. And so perhaps these changes, physiological changes that occur during REM sleep is because we are actively dreaming about something that we are doing, such as maybe running or bicycling or kicking or some other form of physical activity. And so when you wake up a person during REM sleep, about 80% of the folks will recall that they were actively dreaming something like that. And so if we are able to act out those dreams, what do you think would happen? It would be terrible, right? We would be, punching and kicking ourselves or our bed headboard or whatever, or even our bed partners, and so we could get really injured. But God has created us so that we don't do that. And the way God has created us not to do that is to put paralyzing chemicals in the brainstem, and so we don't move. So we are temporarily paralyzed during REM sleep. And so, as you know, when we go to sleep, our muscles relax. So during non-REM sleep, our muscles relax. But during REM sleep, our muscles relax even more, and actually we are temporarily paralyzed, except for our eyes that are rapidly moving. That's why it's called rapid eye movement sleep. And our chin muscles, our fingers, and our toes may twitch a little bit, but our body is paralyzed during that time. There is a disorder called REM sleep behavior disorder, and in this disorder, this paralysis is removed. So the person is able to act out their dreams, and so they and their bed partners can get injured. Melatonin actually helps with that disorder. Now let's talk about how we sleep. How does the body know when to sleep and when to get awake? So scientists have discovered two different processes that drive sleep and wakefulness. The first is the circadian rhythm sustained by our body clock. And you've probably all have heard about body clock, and we'll talk about that. And the second process is called homeostatic process. This is driven by mounting sleep debt as we stay alert longer. The longer we are awake and active, a metabolic waste compound called adenosine build up in our brain, and we get sleepy. The longer we stay awake, as adenosine accumulate more and more. This is what is called homeostatic process. Adenosine is a byproduct of ATP energy molecule. The longer we stay awake, active, and use energy, the more ATP we use up, and the adenosine accumulate in our brain. As that accumulates more and more, then we get sleepier and sleepier. Of course, there are overriding signals that keep us awake when there is stimulating situations, such as social activities, stressful or emergency situations, or when we are watching an exciting show. Of course, there are however, as you stay awake longer, more adenosine accumulate, and it is harder to resist sleep. So there's another process called circadian rhythm. Circadian signal increases our alertness as opposed to adenosine that makes us sleepier. And the stronger the signal is, the more alert we are. So in the morning, the circadian signal rises to wake us up and keep us awake through the day. And the signal falls in the evening so we could go to sleep. By the way, if you naturally get sleepy in the middle of the day, you're not alone. And this is due to a small dip in that circadian rhythm signal in the middle of the day. Europeans take siesta time because of this. And so taking a short 20-minute nap is okay in the middle of the day, and it could be healthy. This circadian rhythm is also commonly referred to as body clock. And this clock is adapted to the time zone that we live in. For instance, we who live here in Walla Walla have body clock adapted to the Pacific time zone. And we are not yet ready to go to sleep. Our body's wide awake, I hope. And but whereas in people that are in London or in the Europe somewhere, their time is past 1 a.m. or even after that, and most people there are sound asleep by this time. So our body clock adapts to where we live, to our time zones. And this adaptation is crucial for us to function properly in social and work environment, but also important in maintaining our health. Sleeping and eating at wrong times and not getting enough sleep leads to poor health. For example, sleeping at wrong times and not getting enough sleep over a long period of time can lead to many types of diseases, including cognitive impairment and dementia, mood changes and depression and anxiety, increase in cardiovascular disease such as heart attacks and strokes, diabetes, weight gain, and even cancer. We will go into all this in more detail later. Here are some sobering statistics on sleep loss in the United States. In 2017, the CDC reported 70 million Americans have chronic sleep problems. And a third of adults regularly don't get enough sleep. Nearly half of Americans snore, which increases risk of sleep apnea, which increases risk for other diseases. Almost all of American adults report losing sleep due to binge watching. And there are some good evidences that show weight gain epidemic in the United States over the past several decades that has been rising, is associated with increasing artificial light environment and insufficient sleep because of this. So the prevalence of sleep disorder in the United States is so high that CDC declared insufficient sleep a public health problem, and American Heart Association added sleep health as one of the 8 health principles to prevent heart diseases. Mrs. White counseled us, "We have not practiced intelligently that which we have received in knowledge, and unless it is practiced, the body will decay." And now we have scientific evidences that this pertains to sleep as well. So before we talk more about how to improve sleep health, I need to show you some more adverse health risks that can happen with poor sleep. First, let's talk about immediate effects of sleep deprivation. An experiment showed that few days of sleep deprivation reduce attention span and reaction time. And of course, when this occurs, then we're not able to learn as well or interact with others as well. It reduces our ability to perform, to learn. It also affects us while we are working, reducing our productivity and making us more prone to accidents. And of course, it increases our risk for accidents on the road when we are driving or operating heavy machinery. For people who already have sleep disorders like sleep apnea, the risk goes up even higher. Interestingly, people who are cognitively impaired from sleep deprivation are not aware of the degree of their impairment and oftentimes overestimate their abilities, which further increase their risk on the road and at their work. So how many of you experience that when you get sleepy, then you feel like you could go on just a little longer and longer, right? Yeah. So best thing to do actually in those kind of cases is get off the road and find a safe place to take a short nap, 15 to 20 minutes. That's the only way to get rid of that sleep pressure. A person staying awake overnight by the midday the following day functions at a level of legal intoxication. And in the United States, the legal intoxication limit is 0.08%, but for commercial drivers, it's actually 0.04%. And so that does increase our risk of getting into accidents when we are sleep deprived. Now, let's talk about long-term effects of sleep deprivation. There is increased mortality risk in people getting less than 6.5 hours of sleep, shortening our lifespan. Sleep deprivation causes alteration in our immune defense functions and can lead to more infection and increased risk for cancer. And this occurs because it changes the immune system regulators, such as cytokines and natural killer cell activity. Growth hormone is suppressed with sleep deprivation. Now, growth hormone helps children to grow, but for adults, it is important in healing our body. Chronic sleep restriction increases stress hormone, and that further increases cardiovascular stress and risk for heart diseases. Chronic habitual sleep deprivation is associated with increase in body weight and increased craving for calorie-rich food. And I'll show you how that happens in a bit. Sleep deprivation influences how well you lose weight on a diet. How does this happen? Well, sleep influences two important appetite hormones in our body called leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is a hormone that decreases appetite, so when leptin levels are high, then we feel fuller. Ghrelin is the opposite. Ghrelin hormone stimulates appetite and is often referred to as hunger hormone because rise in this hormone level causes you to feel hungry. So hunger hormone, or the ghrelin, rises with sleep deprivation, and the opposite happens with leptin. And so this combination increases a person's appetite and makes a person more likely to overeat and make it harder for the person to stick to a reduced calorie diet. Other studies show sleep deprivation and sleep restriction lead to insulin resistance and obesity because sleep is important in regulating glucose and metabolism. Reduced sleep also impacts our food selection, as I mentioned earlier, and the way the brain perceives food. When you are sleep deprived, the reward center in the brain are more active in response to food. So sleep deprived people snack more often and tend to choose calorie-rich food compared to those who get enough sleep. But after sleep loss during the weekday, can you catch up on the weekend to undo the harm that occurred during the week? And I think, Emily, you asked that question this morning. And so this is part of the answer. So it's not a full answer. This study showed that people on a low-calorie diet and sleeping 1 hour less each night lost less weight compared to people who were sleeping their regular hours of sleep. And when they tried to catch up on sleep on the weekends, that was not enough to make the difference. Okay. Now, Alzheimer's disease is a devastating disease that impacts about 50 million people around the globe. And it is estimated to rise to 150 million by 2050. The cause is thought to be due to accumulation of beta amyloid, which is one of the byproduct toxins in the brain. As it accumulates in the brain, the amyloid plaques form, that's solidified beta amyloid protein, and that causes destruction of the nerve cells because it's toxic. Even 1 night of sleep deprivation causes beta amyloid protein to rise in the brain. So how does this happen? When we are awake, beta amyloid protein accumulate in the brain space between the cells because of the metabolic activity that's going on in the brain. And glymphatic system, which was discovered in 2013, clears the toxin byproducts from the brain during sleep by opening the fluid space between the cells as these cells shrink. And this happens during deep sleep. And they calculated that there's 60% increase in fluid space for better flow of these fluids to effectively remove toxin built up during the day while you are awake. So while we are awake, there is about 25% increase in beta amyloid concentration through the day. But with good sleep, all of that could be removed potentially by good sleep. So, so the theory is that sleeping well every night possibly may reduce risk or even perhaps prevent Alzheimer's disease. So how much sleep do we need? According to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and National Sleep Foundation, the appropriate sleep duration for a newborn is 14 and 17 hours. Sleep requirement declines with aging, where adults in general require 7 to 9 hours, and older adults require 7 to 8 hours. But there is individual differences, as I mentioned earlier. And there are rare families who inherit short sleep genes. And this line of individuals may need only 4 to 6 hours of sleep and still function very well. But these are very rare, and most adults require more than 7 hours of sleep. Up to now, we focused mainly on duration of sleep, and now we're going to focus on timing of sleep, and when to sleep and when not to sleep. But before we go on, I'd like to ask if you have any questions about what we talked about so far. Wait for the microphone, please.
I had a question about REM sleep disorder because I happen to be one of those people. So I was told by my neurologist that depending on the study, what's that? Oh, is that you? Oh, maybe, never mind. Then you would answer the question because you were saying that 50 to 90% of people that have REM sleep disorder end up developing Parkinson's, and it depends on which study.
Yes. So we don't have the exact number, but it is estimated that people with REM sleep behavior disorder do have higher risk of developing Parkinson's type of diseases, and they're classified under what's called synucleinopathy, and these are abnormal proteins that develop in the brain, and those folks could develop Parkinson's disease. Roughly, they calculated maybe 6% per year chance of accumulating risk, but that's not exactly true. We don't know for sure. This was a calculated estimate. So over the decades, the longer you have the disease, then there's higher risk for that, but not certain.
And then is for this deep sleep, were you going to cover later, like what you can do to increase the amount of deep sleep?
Yes, I'll go over some of the techniques they could use to improve that later. There's one there.
Dr. Chung, you alluded in one of your early slides about we're in the Pacific time zone. And I think you were alluding a little bit toward the debate, or you could talk about the debate with daylight savings time. So based on your clinical work with your patients in Wenatchee or other places, if you had your own magic wand, would you do away with daylight savings time, and what effects do you see every March and October when this occurs?
Oh yes, that's a big debate, even going on in the government, and sleep societies. They're trying to convince the government to not to do daylight saving time, but revert to standard time all across the board. And the reason for that is because when you have daylight savings time, we lose an hour, right, into the day. And so our body is not ready. Even that 1 hour change, our body doesn't function as well. And we, in addition to losing that sleep, because our body cannot catch up to that rhythm, then we are more prone to accidents and whatnot. Our health goes down. I'll kind of get into it a little bit more as I talk about circadian rhythm in the next section of the talk. Yeah. Okay. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go on. Let's talk about circadian rhythm. The book of Genesis tells us that God prepared a beautiful home for us, this beautiful planet Earth. He did this by creating the necessary conditions and environment successively day by day, starting with separating light from the darkness and creating day and night. Why did God create day and night in the beginning? Well, biologically speaking, day and night distinction helps our body to know when to rest and when to be active, right? God created Earth so that it rotates on an axis around the sun, giving us a 24-hour day-night cycle. And amazingly, God has designed practically all organisms on Earth function around this 24-hour day-night cycle. And this design, which is very important in biological function, is embedded in the DNA, the blueprint of every organism. This 24-hour rhythm is called circadian rhythm, and it means about a day. Bacteria has genes that regulate 24-hour day-night rhythm, and even plants have circadian rhythm. For example, mimosa plant leaves are open during the day and closes in the dark of the night. Surprisingly, the same opening and folding pattern of the leaves is noted even in the constant darkness hidden in a box. And so this means that there is an internal clock mechanism in the plant that drives this 24-hour rhythm. We humans cycle rhythmically through 24-hour as well, with different changes of inner workings of our body depending on the hour of the day and night. This is so that our body can function best as it adapts to the changes of day and night. The most obvious change is sleep, of course, but there are other important internal changes that you don't see that occur as well. For example, body temperature and blood pressure decrease as the night progresses. Then, in anticipation for the day, they begin to rise a couple of hours before we wake up. This change continues despite staying awake through the night with help of the clock genes activity. Some other examples of changes that occur in our body during sleep include heart rate, blood flow to the brain and muscles, as well as many kinds of hormones, including melatonin, which helps us to sleep, but it also helps us to be synchronized to this time zone, which I'll talk about in a bit. Also cortisol level, which is our stress hormone, hunger hormone, satiety hormone we talked about earlier, and growth hormone, to name some. All of the cyclic changes in our body is managed and controlled by a set of clock genes. Without proper working of clock genes regulating the cyclical working of our body does not work well. So in an individual, all the cells in that person's body must function harmoniously, in harmony, synchronized with each other for the body to work well and for the person to maintain healthy life. This means that all the clocks of individual cells must synchronize with each other. And this happens because of a master clock in the brain that helps to align all organs adapted to the current time zone. If the cells and organ function independently of each other with different rhythms, the organs will not function well together, and that person will get eventually sick. Unfortunately, we humans are the only organisms on Earth that willfully sleep and eat at wrong times, which disrupt this rhythm and lead to diseases. So how does the body align with the day and night cycle of the time zone we live in? This happens through a tiny nucleus in the brain called suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's located just behind the eyes in the brain, and this tiny nucleus acts as a master clock through the workings of the clock genes that I talked about. Although it keeps a predictable 24-hour rhythm, it is not locked in without being able to shift and adapt to a different time zone in different parts of the world. God has programmed the clock to adapt as we travel to different time zones. However, it does not adapt immediately to sudden change in the time zone. So how many of you have experienced jet lag? Yes. So that pertains to this circadian rhythm adaptation. So the longer distance you travel on a jet plane, the more days your body needs to adapt to that time zone, right? However, we can artificially create this jet lag, and it's called social jet lag. You've heard of social jet lag, right? Okay, I'll describe what that is. So it happens when you go to sleep and wake up at different hours. And so that's going against your body rhythm. So how does the body adapt to the time zone that we live in? When you travel to a different time zone by jet plane, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or that master clock, gathers information from that new time zone to align your body rhythm to that time zone. This process of adaptation is called entrainment. And the strongest entrainment signal is light, especially the blue light spectrum, which is plentifully available in the sunlight. So as the sun comes up in the morning, the natural light signals the brain it is morning time for this time zone that you are at, and start to set the body clock for that day. Other important entrainment signals include mealtime, socialization, and work. There is special dedicated receptors in the backside of the eyes called melanopsin, and this is a very special dedicated receptor that connects directly to this suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock. And as that receptor receives light from the sunlight or bright light, then it sends a signal directly to that nucleus. Then through various connections in the brain and nerves in the neck, the signal reaches the pineal gland in the backside of the brain. When it finally reaches the pineal gland, it releases melatonin, and melatonin is released about 2 hours before you go to bed. And that helps us to sleep. But also, as melatonin is released into the bloodstream, and this is very important to regulate and align your rhythm with the time zone that you live in. That melatonin is carried to all the organs through the blood, and it signals all the organs of the body that it is nighttime. So we have, in the morning, the sunlight coming up, signaling to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, our master clock, that it is morning, and that signal gets to the rest of the body through the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. And in the evening, it signals the melatonin to be released in the brain to get to the rest of the organ to signal the body that it's nighttime. And so that's how it aligns the body to that time zone. And that alignment of the organs to the master clock is crucial for proper function of the body and mind. So in the morning, again, this is melatonin example. So in the morning, day and night, your melatonin begin to be released few hours before bedtime and peaks in the middle of the night, and is reduced to essentially none by the morning when we wake up to the sunrise. However, melatonin release can be interrupted by poor sleep habits of staying awake longer than we should, or keeping bright light on at night when we should be sleeping. This is because melatonin release is inhibited by bright light. In this experiment, you can see there is a large dip in melatonin level in the middle of the night when exposed to a bright light. The white bar you can see in the graph represents the bright light exposure, and you can see the melatonin level plummeting during this period. What this means is that the body gets confused, not knowing if it's night or day, and when you have the bright light on in the middle of the night. Studies have shown that even light from electronic devices like cell phone and electronic pads can harmfully suppress the melatonin level. So it is important to dim the light in your home starting about 2 hours before bedtime, and put your electronic devices to night mode to reduce those harmful blue and white light spectrum exposure to your eyes. So as you can imagine, the most harmful behavior that causes circadian rhythm disruption is irregular sleep pattern and exposure to bright light in the middle of the night. Going to sleep at wrong times will create this harmful circadian rhythm mismatch. It's like causing perpetual jet lag for your body. And if this mismatch of circadian rhythm and sleep persists for a long time, diseases can take over. Here is an illustration of how circadian rhythm disruption might cause diseases. The clock at the top center represents the master clock in the brain, and as discussed, it is synchronized to day-night rhythm dictated by the rising sun and setting of the sun in that time zone. Panel A represents a healthy circadian rhythm with all the organs synchronized to each other, because this individual was going to bed and getting up at the right time, at the same time every day, and eating, socializing, exercising at the right time. Panel B represents the gastrointestinal system out of sync with the rest of the body due to eating at the wrong times. Can you see the liver and the intestines out of sync with the master clock and the lungs? You can see the clock difference there, right? The last panel represents all the organ systems out of sync with each other due to irregular pattern of sleeping, eating, and socializing. And so if poor daily routine, particularly poor sleep pattern, continues, it leads to excessive stress to the body because the organs are not able to work together in harmony, and then diseases can take over, such as heart disease, strokes, depression and anxiety, cholesterol problems, diabetes, and weight gain. Immune system does not function as well, increasing risk for infection and cancer. It also affects the reproductive system and can reduce fertility. It can even increase risk for dementia, like Alzheimer's. So let's discuss more specifically about some diseases related to this. And sleeping at wrong times can cause insulin resistance and thus increase the blood sugar level, especially for people who are diabetic. It can reduce satiety hormone, the leptin, remember the leptin, and you will not feel full, thus leading to overeating. Eating late causes weight gain. When people that have breakfast and dinner more than 14 hours apart in this experiment, compared to people who had breakfast and dinner separated by less than 10 hours, the 10-hour group lost weight and were more energetic and had improved sleep. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how sleep affects our relationship with each other and God. An important aspect of sleep health is that it can help us in maintaining stable mood, better thinking ability, and decision making. Default mode network is one of the important brain network connections that is unique to human beings, that God has created for us. It makes us who we are. It has important connections to our frontal lobe, and as probably a lot of you already know, that the frontal lobe is the seat of our character. This network of nerve connection is active when we are thinking of ourselves, others, as well as past and our future. It is active when we are evaluating our experiences and making plans in association with our values. It is important in forming healthy thoughts and initiating actions. So disruption of this network could lead to poor decision making and irritable mood. And with this network very badly disrupted, disorderly conduct and even psychiatric symptoms could result. This network is strengthened during deep sleep, and it works like this. During deep sleep, the nerve in this network fires together slowly, synchronized with each other, and allows to strengthen certain connections and weaken others. Changes in our view of the world solidify and integrate into our existing memory this way, with important connections becoming stronger and less important ones becoming weaker. Thus, new and improved values and habit could form. In other words, during good deep sleep, the brain rewires and reprograms your interpretation of the world and strengthens your values that are important to you, like Christian values. For instance, a Christian's experience of saving grace of God is an important and meaningful experience. The brain rewires connections and solidifies this in sleep. So we respond to the world differently from that point on, of course, with the Holy Spirit's guidance. Healthy default network is important in preserving our good values, and so we can function optimally as good human beings as God has designed us. It relates to how well we get along with others and make good decisions based on our values. Therefore, healthy sleep habits and sleeping well can enhance this brain network and help us to make better decisions and help us to be happier in our Christian walk. So up to now, we concentrated on science of sleep health, and I'm sorry it got a little bit long there, but now we are going to switch gears again and talk more about how to preserve our good sleep health. So how do you maintain sleep, good sleep, and circadian rhythm health? So have you heard about New Start? Of course you have. And New Start stands for N for nutrition, E for exercise, W for water, S for sunshine, T for temperance, A for air, R for rest, and T for trusting God. And here are some of the practical suggestions for sleep based on New Start principle. As I go through each slide, see which New Start principle, health principle applies to it. The focus is to maintain good circadian rhythm health. First, remember to keep good daily routine. You can do this by first strengthening the signal to the master clock in your brain. And how do you do that? The best way to do that is to walk in the morning or for about half an hour or more and soak up that natural light that God has created for us. And this will stimulate that master clock behind the eyes and allow that robust release of melatonin at nighttime. Make sure you're well hydrated before and after your walk. By doing so, you get a healthy dose of sunlight, exercise for the day, and fresh air and water. For added benefit, if you have access, exercise in nature helps one to obtain deeper sleep by increasing restorative nervous system called vagal nervous system. So nature walks can give you better restorative sleep. Eat healthy meals and at regular meal times. Avoid unhealthy snacks at any time of the day or at night, which can interfere with deep sleep. Dinner should be at least 3 hours before bedtime. Eating late could reduce deep sleep and impact weight control. And remember to keep that breakfast and dinner time spent less than 10 hours. And for people with diabetes, keeping this time spent less than 8 hours helps to control glucose even better. And to emphasize the importance of regular meal times, this study showed that people with irregular eating pattern took longer to fall asleep and had less deep sleep. In contrast, eating meals on a regular schedule improved sleep. Also, increase in saturated fat meals reduce deep sleep, and sugar and other processed carbohydrates caused broken sleep. However, you can get sounder sleep by increasing fiber in your diet. Avoid stimulants, especially in the late afternoons and evenings, to avoid insomnia and sleep disruption. Caffeine lasts a long time in your body, and people who are slow metabolizers, it takes longer to get out of the body. So caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. What that means is that if you drank a beverage with caffeine that had maybe 200 milligrams at, say, 3 p.m., by 9 p.m., that will be halved in your bloodstream, so 100 milligram at 9 p.m., and then 50 milligram at 3 a.m., and so on. And so it could last a long time in your body. And even if you could fall asleep with caffeine, it could still disrupt your sleep and rob you of having deep sleep. And by the way, caffeine, half of the population may be a slower metabolizers, so that caffeine could stay in the body even longer than that. And next, dim the lights in the evening hours, few hours before bedtime, again, to have that melatonin be released nicely, and turn on night mode on your electronic devices. And during long summer days, when the sun is still out really late here in Walla Walla, if you have to go out to walk, or you want to go out to walk a few hours before bedtime, you want to wear a tinted glasses so to prevent that bright light coming into your eyes. And avoid watching TV or use computers, cell phone, or tablets in your bed. Turn off all the electronic screens, devices at least half an hour to 1 hour before bedtime to get your mind and body ready for sleep. If you are not used to this, set a gentle reminder alarm on your phone or on your watch to remind you to turn your electronic devices off. And this time will be a good time to maybe have your personal devotion and meditate on the goodness of God during this quiet time. Or you may want to do personal journaling on positive things. And one way to do that, a good way to do that, is called gratitude journaling. And what gratitude journaling is, just thinking about 3 things that you're thankful for that happened on that day. And this is a simple tool, but very powerful tool that studies have shown. Studies have shown that people that do this on a regular basis at nighttime, after 6 months, when they compared to the group that did not do it, the group that did this every night had much higher happiness score and lower depression score if they were depressed. And if you have worries, give it to God. And if you have anxiety, some deep breathing, relaxation exercises could help. If you keep thinking about what to do next day, that keeps you awake, then just write it down so it doesn't bother you in your sleep, because it will be there the following day. Remember to get in the habit of going to bed and rising in the morning at a regular time, including on the weekend, 7 days a week. And this is to keep that circadian rhythm steady as well. This will also remember to get enough sleep every night. Remember, most adults require 7 to 9 hours of sleep, depending on your genetic makeup. And one way to find out what your sleep duration need is, and if you have opportunity, take a 2-hour sleep vacation. And what that means is that during that time, you try to figure out what is optimum for your sleep duration. So you do all these sleep habits that are good that I've just discussed, and go to bed at a regular time, and wake up in the morning when you naturally wake up. And if you do that for about 2 weeks, you could figure out what is really good duration of sleep that will really rejuvenate you and help you to function best. So we're going to talk about quality of sleep now. Even though you may have good bedding and good environment to sleep in, and even though you may be doing all the right thing with your sleep habits, you could still have poor quality of sleep if you have sleep disorders. And I'm going to be talking about just 2 sleep disorders, common sleep disorders, since we don't have the time to go over others at this time. But we could do a question and answer session if you have any other questions. The first disorder I'm going to be talking about is restless leg syndrome. And it is a common condition that causes insomnia, and sometimes it could disrupt sleep as well, because about 80% or more people with restless leg syndrome have what's called periodic movement of sleep, or PLMS. And what that is a periodic jerking of the legs during sleep that could disrupt your sleep quality. So the condition has these 4 features. Number 1, there's an uncomfortable sensation in your legs with severe urge to move them. And it primarily occurs when you're resting, while you're sitting or when you're lying down. And it is improved when you're moving your legs. You have to either stretch them, move them, get up and walk, and so on. And it occurs primarily in the evening hours following the circadian rhythm pattern. And restless leg syndrome is associated with low iron store in the brain, because iron is needed in the brain to balance out dopamine, and dopamine is one of the important neurotransmitters that's important to doing many different things in the brain, but one of the functions is to help our body to move. And so when the dopamine is not regulated, then it could make that restless leg worse. So if you have restless leg syndrome, it bothers you a lot, and if you haven't had an iron profile done, I would encourage you to see your doctor to maybe get a referral to either a neurologist or a sleep doctor to get that done. So before trying any medication for restless leg syndrome, it's important that natural methods be tried first, and these include adhering to the sleep principle that I just discussed. Avoiding caffeine is important too, because caffeine could actually make restless leg worse. And exercising daily in moderation is important, because if you have too much physical activity, it could make it worse, and too little activity could also make it worse too. Stretching and exercises at night and hot baths, maybe 1 to 2 hours before bedtime, vibration massages, these could all help. Lastly, we're going to talk about obstructive sleep apnea, and this is a very common disorder. In sleep medicine clinic, this consists of about 90% of our patients. It's a condition where the airway collapses during our sleep as our muscles relax. That tongue muscle and the surrounding upper airway muscles could relax too much, and it could collapse and obstruct the airway, so we don't get enough air. Oxygen level dips during that time. As that oxygen level dips, then that causes a lot of cascade of different stressful physiological changes. So stress hormone could go up during that time, and blood pressures could spike up, heart rate could jump up and down, and even glucose level could go up during that time. And so that causes arousal, and so person briefly wakes up, and you're not going to remember that because it's so brief for several seconds, and it opens up the airway, but as soon as the muscle relaxes, it'll collapse again, and that cycle repeats itself, and so that causes sleep disruption. And a lot of people are sleepy and tired during the daytime, but believe it or not, about a quarter of people with sleep apnea don't complain of being sleepy or tired, yet they could still have maybe moderate or severe sleep apnea that could increase risk for other conditions. So sleep apnea folks have higher risk of having like heart attacks and strokes, and moderate and severe sleep apnea folks have at least twice the risk of having heart attacks and almost 3 times the risk of having stroke compared to people who don't have sleep apnea. And it could increase blood pressure during the day, sugar level could go up, so there's increased risk for diabetes, heart failure, irregular heart rhythm, dementia, these risks all go up. So how do you screen for sleep apnea? So this is a stop bank questionnaire that we use commonly in our clinic to screen people for sleep apnea. And you could ask yourself these 8 questions. And if you answer 3 or more, then that does increase your risk of sleep apnea. The higher the score is, the higher risk you have. So the first question is, do you snore loud? And second one is, do you feel tired most of the time? Third is, does your spouse notice that you stop breathing? Or do you wake up choking, gasping, or coughing? And fourth, do you have high blood pressure or take blood pressure medication? And 5, is your body mass index more than 35? Are you more than 50 years of age? Is your neck size more than 16 inches? Or are you a man? So because male gender have higher risk of sleep apnea. And so for the CPAP actually is the best treatment. And CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure therapy, and it works by pushing air through the mask and pressurizing that space between the tongue and the backside of the throat, and keeps the airway open that way. But some people have difficulty sleeping with. I would suggest maybe up to 30% in our clinic are estimated not to be able to sleep with this device. And so for alternative treatment options for sleep apnea include oral appliance therapy. And this device is approved for mild and moderate sleep apnea, not for severe sleep apnea. It works by wearing this device at nighttime when you're sleeping. And as it brings your lower jaw forward, then it brings the tongue forward and opens that airway and prevents that airway from collapsing. So that's how that works. The most common side effect was TMJ pain, because as the lower jaw comes forward, that's going to move that temporomandibular joint, and it could cause pain there. And the other side effect is that it could move your teeth, and so that could cause malocclusion, or your bite may get off. And if the sleep apnea is severe and you cannot tolerate any treatments, there is surgical options. There are various different surgical options for sleep apnea. Probably the best one that works is something called hypoglossal nerve stimulation therapy. And this is the most recent arrival to sleep apnea surgery. It's made by Inspire Company, and it's FDA approved for people whose body mass index is less than 35 and who have severe sleep apnea. It works by stimulating the tongue to come forward every time you breathe in. And of course, it's only on when you're sleeping. Finally, for sleep apnea, folks, weight has close connection to the severity of sleep apnea. So every 10% weight loss can improve sleep apnea by 26%. And the opposite is true. Every 10% weight gain can worsen sleep apnea by 32%. So weight management by lifestyle changes, including sleep health, as I mentioned, sleep health could improve weight, is important in treatment of sleep apnea. Okay, so finally, for concluding remark, I would like to say that sleep health is just as important as diet and exercise when considering lifestyle factors in optimizing your health. With proper sleep, you will feel better because your brain fog will lift. It will help you to make better decisions, help to better manage your stress, be happier, have more energy, and your glucose, blood pressure, headache, pain, and other conditions improve. Sustaining proper sleep habits and maintaining regular meal time will control your hunger and craving for high-calorie food and help you to maintain healthy weight. And it could help prevent a host of chronic diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, mental disorders, dementia, cancer, and probably more. So I would like to leave you with these Bible verses for those nights when sleep does not come to you. In Psalms 116, David thanks the Lord this way: I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy. Because he inclined his ears to me, therefore I will call on him as long as I live. The snares of death encompassed me. The pangs of Sheol laid hold on me. I suffered distress and anguish. Then I called on the name of the Lord. O Lord, I pray, deliver my soul. Gracious is the Lord and righteous. Our God is merciful. The Lord preserves the simple. When I was brought low, he saved me. Return, O my soul, to your rest, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you. All right. Well, thank you for your attention. I know it's been a long talk, but if you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have 3 questions. It was all about the timing of sleep. So my first question was how does the latitude of a person's location affect their sleep? Because the days would be longer closer to the equator, right? And then also if somebody has or works night shifts, how does that affect it? And also if somebody starts sleeping before or after midnight, how does that affect sleep?
Yeah, so first question I didn't quite hear. Did you say
the latitude, on the globe? So if they live in a northern latitude versus closer to the equator?
Yes, right, okay. So the more northern or more southern latitude you go, then you'll have longer days depending on the season. And so those longer days, when the light is out during the nighttime, then it can affect your circadian rhythm and melatonin release. So if you are already having difficulty that way, then it's probably good to wear filtered glasses, like orangish filtered glasses to prevent that blue light spectrum from coming into your eyes late in the night. But the other side is also could be a problematic when the days are too short. Like in Seattle or even here, there could be some folks with seasonal affective disorder, where in the wintertime the day is so short that we get depressed. And that has to do with circadian rhythm function as well, and because we're not getting enough sunlight in the morning. So to treat that, then we could expose ourselves to bright light in the morning And because we don't have bright light in the morning in Walla Walla in the wintertime, then light box therapy or light therapy would be helpful. You could purchase these online very easily. Just small LED box, light box that needs to be at least 10,000 lux of light, and you could sit in front of it. You don't directly look at it. You just need to be on your in front of you or on your side for 30 minutes or more a day in the morning time, and that could help. The second question was, what was it again? Oh, yes. So shift work is a challenge because if you have to keep shifting different work schedule, then your body's not going to have enough time to adjust to that circadian rhythm change. And so that does increase health risk. But the best way to handle that is try to talk to your boss and try to get it as the regular schedule work as much as possible, but for maybe longer period of working at one shift before you change to the next one, not quickly shifting back and forth. And then the other one is if you can't convince your boss to help you to be more stable in your work schedule, is to transition into the next phase a little bit more smoothly by taking naps in the late afternoon or early evening hours before you go to work that night, and then trying to, on your off days, trying to keep your sleep schedule as regular as possible. So oftentimes people that work at night shift, they sleep during the daytime, and then they don't have social activity with their family. And so they try to make that up by sleeping on their off days at nighttime. And so they could be available during the day, but that could be harmful to their health. So what I suggest to my patients is to go to bed together with your spouse, but take a nap instead of sleeping through the night, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and then get up and stay awake and do your regular things during the night, and then go to bed in the morning hours at your regular bedtime. And try that method. Yeah, it is a tough situation, but those things could help sometimes. Taking melatonin could help you to sleep a little bit easier in those transition days. And then what was the third question?
If you start sleeping, like if you sleep before midnight versus after midnight, like.
Oh, yes. If you're not working and if you don't have responsibilities, then I think going to bed earlier is good, because that's naturally our body is designed so that we wake up in the morning when sun rises, and we wind down as the sun goes down. But not all of us. A lot of us has to work, and either stay maybe later in the evening and come home late. And if that's the case, then keeping your sleep schedule as regular as possible is okay. Even if you have to go to bed at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, as long as you do that wind down, starting 2 hours before bedtime, start dimming the light 2 hours before bedtime, and then turning off the electronic devices half an hour to an hour before your bedtime, and so on. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think I heard you say something how sleep is like an anti-inflammatory. Did I hear you mention sleep and how that affects your inflammation in your body? Yes,
I didn't say that directly, but you got it right, though. I did mention that if you don't sleep long enough, and even if you don't sleep at the right time, it could increase your inflammatory markers in your body. You're absolutely right.
So my question has to do with exercise in the evening. Like when you exercise in the evening, I understand the tendency is that your body needs to have a process of slowing down so that you can sleep and so on.
But assuming that you can get to sleep, in a reasonable amount of time, advantageous or not so much?
Yeah, so I think personally speaking, I think exercise in the morning is the best. Like I mentioned, going out to outside to walk or jog or something like that in the morning and when the sun comes up. But not all of us could do that because of various commitments and so on. And so exercising any time of the day is actually okay, including at nighttime, as long as it's not heavy exercise just before bedtime, because cardiovascular exercise just before bedtime will raise your adrenaline, and that's going to prevent you from going to sleep. And so it's got to be usually the recommendation is at least 2 or 3 hours before bedtime for hard cardiovascular exercise. But you could do light exercise as long as it doesn't cause your adrenaline to come up. And you could feel that when you're exercising, you get more alert and so on. So if that's happening just before bedtime, that's not good. Okay, over here.
So I was wondering, so if you have a slightly unusual schedule, for me, my sleep time is 7 p.m. to 4 a.m., which is a bit unusual. So, but it's consistent. But the thing is that my schedule prevents, for example, the 3 hours before that you're talking about. Usually I'm commuting home, and so that's not an option. Is there something that you could do, would wearing a sleep blind be useful when you do start to go to bed, so that basically that it's, I'm saying that at least the environment that you're sleeping in is even darker and that promotes sleep better? Or is there anything that you can do to basically help with that? Because especially in the winter, I'm getting lots of lights in my eyes as I'm driving home and the traffic is shining in my face. So
yeah, what time is that again?
I don't typically get home before 5, and a lot of times not until 6 or 7.
This is in the evening?
Yes.
Okay.
And I leave at 4:30 in the morning, so yeah.
Yeah, so in that kind of situation, but you're able to fall asleep okay though?
Yes, I am, but I'm just wondering, would it be helpful to wear a sleep blind at all, or, the things to cover your eyes to make your environment darker, or?
Yeah, so if you have artificial light coming into your eyes during your sleep, a study showed that people that habitually sleep with the TV on, even though they're sleeping through the night, that they don't have good quality sleep because that light going into the eye, even with the closed eyelid, and interrupting with the melatonin release. So if you have artificial light coming into your room, it's good to wear something so that your eyes don't see that.
But natural light's not an issue? If you got some natural light coming into the room, because it's daylight sometimes when I go to bed.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I said natural light is not an issue coming into the room, though, because sometimes the daylight is still out when I go to bed. Well, actually, even right now, they're 7 o'clock.
Yeah. So melatonin comes out about a couple of hours before bedtime, right? So you want to start wearing something to block that blue light spectrum. And so like orangish filtered goggles could help sometimes.
Does the glass tint that they put on to avoid glare, does that have that in that, do you know? Or
those are, some of if it's clear, it's probably not as good. So it's got to be kind of a more orangish yellow color goggles.
And with that in mind, I take melatonin. Should I maybe take it earlier? So that rather than half an hour before sleep, should I take it even earlier so that it has a chance to?
Well, if you're falling asleep okay, you probably don't need the melatonin.
Well, I do it for the REM sleep disorder
Oh,
part.
yes. That's taken at bedtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 things here to ask you about real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned during REM sleep, our body goes into a state of paralysis. And over the years, maybe a half a dozen times, it doesn't happen all the time, but I've awakened still paralyzed for about 15 or 20 seconds.
Yeah.
What happens? What's going on there?
Yeah, so that is called sleep paralysis. And if you have that alone repeatedly, that's kind of a rare condition called isolated sleep paralysis. And that, you're exactly right, that happens during REM sleep. And so there's a kind of several different things that happens during REM sleep. One is sleep itself, and we don't wake up during that time. But the other process is the paralysis part, right?
Right.
And those are two separate mechanisms in the brainstem. And they're usually linked together, but in sleep paralysis, they're separated. And so you could get awake, but you could be still paralyzed. But it's benign, though. You don't have to worry about not being able to move. And you probably figured this out already.
I once read that nobody ever died from sleep paralysis. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, right.
My
okay.
other question is, could you briefly describe central sleep apnea?
Yeah, so central sleep apnea, just to simply put, is the opposite of obstructive sleep apnea. So obstructive sleep apnea is collapse of the tongue against the backside of the throat. But central sleep apnea is where the airway is wide open. It doesn't collapse, but the brain doesn't give you the signal to breathe. So your chest doesn't move. You stop breathing. Oxygen level dips, and that causes arousal to the brain, and you start breathing again. And that cycle repeats itself through the night. There's several different types of central sleep apnea, but congestive heart failure is one of them that could cause that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, I've got two questions. I've got 4 of the markers for obstructive sleep apnea, and the snoring is of a real concern to my wife. So what practical advice do you have for somebody for snoring and overall to reduce is the BiPAP or CPAP the only way to go? And I've got another question on that.
Sure, yeah. So I would recommend trying CPAP first. And if you're not able to sleep with it and it disrupts your sleep more, then go with other treatment options. If it's mild sleep apnea, then oral appliance therapy could sometimes really help quite a bit, especially if you're on the thinner side than in the more heavier side. And if your chin is receded backwards and you have overbite, for those population with mild and moderate sleep apnea, works actually better with the oral appliance therapy. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, that helps. Another question that I have on the jet lag, I heard it said that if you adjust your this is over larger time zones. If you adjust your eating pattern according to the destination that you're going to, a few maybe a day before you fly out, that would help with the reducing of the jet lag. Have you heard that?
Yes.
It seems to be true in the super
Cosmic nucleus.
Nucleus.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, the body rhythm gets adjusted to the new time zone by not just light, but our meal time and our activity, our socialization, our work, and so on. And so definitely, yeah, changing the eating schedule could help. But more importantly, maybe even changing your sleep schedule with maybe a little bit added melatonin, depending on where you're going. There's a pretty neat app that you could use online, and it's called jetlagRooster.com. And you could use that, and it'll program, if you tell it where you're going and what date, and it'll start to tell you a sleep prescription, telling you when to go to bed, when to get up, and when to use melatonin, if the melatonin is going to help you or not, and so on.
Thank you so much. Just use it 2 hours before you go to sleep, I take it.
Yeah.
Okay, me. I have a couple questions. My main one I'll ask in just a second because your answer might be influenced by my social situation because I am getting old. I've been widowed for quite a few years, and I live alone. So all these kind of things about snoring or choking and stuff, there's no one to tell me, and I'm not aware of it. So, but this might affect my real question, which is either I am a toddler in disguise, or something's wrong, because I sleep 12 to 14 hours all the time. Every once in a while, I might get where I can't get to sleep at night, but 12 to 14 hours is my routine.
Yeah.
I go to bed early, and when I wake up the first time to go potty or something, or the dog wants out, I'm usually not ready to get up, so I go back to bed, and when I do that, it's even worse than 14 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And are you sleepy during your waking time?
No, when I'm up, I'm up.
Yeah. Okay. So some people with sleep apnea or other type of sleep disorder that disturb their quality of sleep sometimes require longer sleep hours. So there are people which genetically prone to sleeping longer than 9 hours. Again, those are very rare, just like short sleep genes. Long sleep genes are even rarer. And so if you require more than 9 hours of sleep, it's probably something to do with your quality of sleep. Something's wrong. And so I probably it's best to get that evaluated, having a sleep study done. And like you said, since no one is able to tell you how you're sleeping, that might be something good to look at.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I was supposed to ask for you too. Are the slides for your presentation available?
I could have it available on PDF file. I could give it to Emily if you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about lots of dim lights in the house at night. Refrigerator, stove, microwave. All these appliances seem like they have a light on. If you get up during the night, does that have an effect on your sleep? By passing by these dim lights?
Dim light? No, dim light does not have effect on your melatonin release. And so dim light is okay. It's just bright light. And there was a question earlier before the session that what do you do if you get awake? You don't have any trouble going to sleep, but you get awake in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. And so one of the things that you don't want to do in the middle of the night, of course, is bright light. So dim light is okay, though. So what I suggest to my patients, if they can't fall back to sleep in the middle of the night, is try not to make that into a subconscious habit, because your brain could learn an insomnia pattern. The longer you stay awake in your bed, not sleeping, that could program your brain to thinking that your bed is not a place to sleep anymore, you know. And so that's how insomnia develops and perpetuates. And so what you do is, if you're not able to fall back to sleep, within about 15 to 20 minutes, without looking at the clock, by the way, because when you look at that time, you start thinking, and that stimulates you even more. And so put the clock away somewhere where it's not visible, but you could still use the alarm if you need to do that, if you need to use it, of course. But about 15 to 20 minutes, if you're not sleeping and you feel wide awake, your body will start to react. Your muscles start to get tense. Your neck muscle starts to feel tense. You don't realize it until you focus your attention on it. Your jaw might start to clench, you know, and you're wide awake. You might start to toss and turn and start to get frustrated. That's usually about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so before you start to get frustrated, don't stay in your bed. Get out of bed. Go to a comfortable chair. The closer the comfortable chair to your bed, it is the better, because you don't want to walk long ways to stimulate yourself. So closer it is to your bed, the better. Go to that chair and do some quiet reading. Maybe you could do some, Bible reading or Mrs. White's reading or something like that, and you could do some prayer, meditations, and things like that until you're ready to go back to sleep and go back to bed and try it again. But if you can't fall back to sleep, again, within 15 to 20 minutes, get out and do the same thing. So you keep doing this until you finally fall asleep comfortably in your bed. But always wake up at the same time to keep that, preserve that circadian rhythm. And don't take naps when you're doing this treatment. because taking nap will take away that sleep pressure and you won't be able to sleep that night. And so don't take naps. And so when you first do this, actually you could lose more sleep. But if you keep doing this, actually you'll be sleep deprived for first several days, but it helps you to sleep better the following night. But the real change occurs about a week or two later when your brain starts to rewire and reprogram, and that insomnia starts to go away. And so this takes some practice and some discipline to do. And so this is part of what's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And there's several different types of techniques to do this. I'm only telling you one part of it right now, called stimulus control therapy. And you always have to link this together with good sleep habits, what I discussed tonight. Regular exercise program, bright light exposure during the day, good meals, healthy meals, regular meal time, and dimming of the light in the evening, and winding down an hour before bedtime.
Hello.
Okay.
I wake up every night and I don't like it. I don't want to. I just wake up and then it's hard for me to get back to sleep. And I'm wondering, should I try to sleep on my back? Should I try to sleep on my side, left, right? Is there a better position to sleep? I know they sell pillows for back sleepers and side sleepers, and I'm just wondering what's the best way to do it?
Well, yeah, position matters if you have sleep apnea, or if you have like reflux disease. Do you have either of those two?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So, some people have reflux disease, and that could disturb their sleep. So if you have reflux, then you could raise the head of the bed by like 30 degrees. And you probably already know this if you have that disease. But if you have sleep apnea, when you're on your back, the tongue could collapse more, you could snore more, that could wake you up more.
So side sleep is better?
Side sleep is better for that kind of condition if you are a snorer. But if you keep having sleep disruption and you're tired during the day, probably it's best to go seek help through a sleep specialist.
Well, so is the right side better than the left side, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter,
yeah.
just so, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dr. Chung, you had said that when you sleep, you start off, and then as you get ready to wake up, the body starts warming up, getting ready for the day, right?
Oh, yeah, 2 hours before.
2 hours before, right.
Yeah.
So is it indicative if you go to bed hot and then start getting cold in the morning? Is that a sign of something, of a problem?
So if you're not having sleep difficulty, well, let me say it this way. So our body clock will naturally bring our temperature down at our regular bedtime schedule, even if you're not going to sleep, and it will dip down. Okay, and then some of you may have noticed if you stay awake, then you start to get cold about 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when your body is at the lowest, and then it starts to go up, right? But in the ladies, if you have, menopausal symptoms and things like that, then your body temperature could be kind of erratic, and that could disturb sleep too. So sometimes the temperature don't rise in the morning until about an hour before. So maybe that might be the reason.
So when you're talking about blue light, something that's a concern for me is that, from my understanding, President Biden signed a thing to basically get rid of fluorescence and go to LEDs, and those are blue light, from what I understand, which can disrupt sleep. So if that happens, instead of dim lights from an LED, should we switch to like a candlelight instead? I mean, would that dimming the light, if it's a blue light, is it going to be any use at all?
Well, blue light is good for the morning, but it's not good for the evening.
Yeah, but that's why, so probably if that happens, if we get rid of the incandescent bulbs and we only have that choice, we switch to candlelight then maybe? Would that be better? No, I mean for the evening, when you're talking
For
about
the
dimming
evening,
lights.
yeah. So kind of incandescent or yellowish hue type of light would be best.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that the president signed an executive order I read online to basically eliminate incandescent lighting because it's not as long lasting as the LED lighting. So basically, they may be substituting one for the other.
Yeah, they do make LED light with yellowish.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Hue. Yeah. Okay, I think it's past 8 o'clock. So, do we need to stop or one last question? Yeah. Okay.
So you were mentioning that if you can't sleep at night, you're supposed to get up and just read. But how do you read without light?
Oh yeah, so it's got to be dim light.
Okay.
Yellowish hue light.
Is it, you know, so I'm a pilot, and so we know quite a bit about night flying and in the coloration of the light. So is a red light, because red obviously does not stimulate as much.
Right.
Is that more advantageous, or just a soft white is fine?
Soft white, I guess, as long as it's more kind of an incandescent kind of hue, more yellowish type of a thing, because yellowish color has less blue light spectrum in it. The more white you get, the more blue light spectrum you get. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.